Thank you very much. Thank you for coming out on this foggy, mysterious night. Kind of makes me want to go, this would be better if it was like a ghost story and we had a little thematic stuff, but I can do ghost stories too. I've got one good ghost story. So I'll tell you a bit about myself and then we'll dive into some fun pictures and hear about anything else that you'd like to add to the list. I'm constantly adding to this presentation, which means either Detroit's getting weirder or it's getting, well, it can't get bigger. It's pretty sizable as it is. But again, I'm Karen Dybis. I'm a Metro Detroit reporter. I'm a journalist by trade. So every day I'm writing stories for newspapers. I freelance for the news and the free press and magazines and blogs and you name it. Autonomous vehicles to cool new nonprofits to whatever it might be. So I'm always out exploring, in other words. So in between writing those articles, I was lucky enough to get a call one day from the History Press. They're one of the publishers that does the local history books. And they said, well, we want you to write a book, because I'd done a story about a drive-in theater in Traverse City area. And they said, well, we want you to write a book about Metro Detroit's drive-in theater. So that led to The Ford, Wyoming. So that was my first book. So if you have any questions about drive-in theaters, myself or the crew of probably about 5 people that still follow this history can let you know. So then if you do a book about a drive-in theater, you have to follow it up with a book about potato chips, because that just makes sense, So I was trying to go down the quirky writing path. But Better Made really is very quiet about their history, and I thought we got to get all these folks on the record about what was the potato chip legacy of Metro Detroit. And the city in particular had about 30 potato chip companies over the decades. So was able to meet a lot of those fantastic people. I'm a creature of habit or I really like to punish myself. So then I went back and wrote another book. This one's called The Witch of Del Rey. And this is a true crime that happened in Detroit in 1931. And this incredible cast of characters that lived in our great, great city. And I will tell you, if you thought Kwame Kilpatrick was the worst of them, so to speak, no, he's got nothing. The scandal that broke during this time frame took 125 people down with it. Kwame's nothing, come on. But in the course of doing all those books, again, learned a lot more about Detroit, about its history, about this whole region, and really gave me an understanding that there was so much more I had to learn to be able to appreciate living here. And it's a city with more than 300 years of history. It's incredibly rich. There's so much going on every day in Detroit right now. You cannot keep up with the ingenuity and creativity and the artistic community that's developed. I'm constantly learning more. So one of the books that came my way was one of these, again, these small print publishers or independent publishers, they're calling themselves now. They suggested a title called Secret Detroit. And all the travel writers in the area turned it down, because for a travel writer, you don't want some hidden gem. You want the places that everybody's going to want to go and you're going to go review it. So I got thrown on this one and I said, I would be happy to do this, because I love the quirky and the strange and the little hideaway places that are present in the city. So in some cases, they are secret in that maybe somebody forgot about them. In some cases, they're just plain unique. And in some cases, they are just places I think everybody should know about and visit and frequent so that they never close, i.e. Better Made chips and things like that. But again, just to reiterate this, is that this is a humongous city. And at home to more than 2 million people at its peak. It grew so fast and so quickly that it just annexed whole towns and villages. If Highland Park and Hamtramck hadn't been Johnny's on the spot, they would have been absorbed into this massive growth around the auto companies and the other manufacturing facilities. So it is challenging to get to know how big Detroit is. But once you start driving it to see these places, and I went to every single place that's in the book, as well as many, many more. I had a list of 150 possible places to include and had to narrow it down to 90. And I was revising that all the way up to when the book was published. And you'll see in the presentation too, there's places in here that are not in the book because, again, the city just keeps getting more and more interesting. But the thing I always like to emphasize, especially if you have not been to the city for a while, is you hear about, new Detroit and a renaissance and a rebirth and all these other things, and people can be skeptical. But in my mind, and in no more better time than this in this generation, it really is a significant investment occurring right now. So these are some pictures of that example of what is happening in the city that I think is so exciting. You've got City Modern, which is a humongous development that Dan Gilbert's companies are doing in the Brush Park area. Brush Park has these incredible Victorians, and then so much room to grow that they're kind of filling in with these smaller condos and different developments. That's the first kind of major housing development the Gilbert people are doing, and so far so good on that one. You got brand new parks like Beacon Park, which was across the street from DTE's headquarters. They had been looking at that parcel for so long and finally just activated it, to use the phrasing of your kind of modern urbanists today. They put in a restaurant, they put in a performance space. It is really unique in that it still is programming even all through the winter. If you want to go see some movies, I guarantee Beacon Park is showing something this weekend. Really fun park. The big skyscraper-looking building, its design has slightly changed since this, but that's going to be where the old Hudson's site was. It's the new Hudson's building, as everybody's going to call it. But that's going to be taller than the Renaissance Center. So it's really going to be the building in Detroit in some ways. Whether you love it or hate it, again, the Gilbert people are behind it. Bedrock Detroit, they don't care if you love it or hate it. They just want you to talk about it. They are the ultimate PR people. Obviously, Little Caesars Arena, huge development there. And then I include that strange picture in the upper left because that is a architectural board that Dan Gilbert has taken across the United States back and forth as he goes and spreads the word about what he sees happening in the city. And that thing is all electrified, for lack of a better word. If you watched Iron Man and you see Tony Stark bring things to life into 3D, that board does that. It has every tree, every building, every street in the core of Detroit, and he takes that to show people the potential of the city. So if you're going to invest in that, and you're going to invest in all these other things like some of these other big corporations and businesses have, to me, it's clear that this is a city that will always be. We got 300 years, and we're going to have a lot more. Oh, I did something funky on this end. Hold on. I hit a funny button, and the computer says, "What are you up to?" But to be able to tell the story of our city, I feel like you also have to know some of its history, you have to know the characters, and you've got to know who's coming up and who's making some big changes. And so I set myself to that task over, I will not even exaggerate, like the last 15 years in trying to understand Detroit and who it is. The Time Magazine project that came into the city, probably 2008 or so, needed a blogger. So I was one of the bloggers for it. There was a whole crew of us. And that was my assignment, was get out of the suburbs, go back in and learn and experience and, do everything you can to get to know the city. And so you've got these wonderful historical buildings. This one actually, the old city hall just got reactivated and is looking to lease its spots and get going. Sorry, county building. I always do that every single time I give it the city hall moniker, the old county building. And everybody has their favorite places, the places we know and have gone to all our lives that are wonderful memory-making places, Belle Isle and Tiger Stadium, I always call it that, even though it's Comerica Park. And very recognizable landmarks that will always be icons of the city. The Joe Louis Fist, the Spirit of Detroit. That was kind of one of the fun parts of doing the book, is learning about Marshall Fredericks and those things in his hands. What were they? The one is a little family. A father, child, and mother. And then obviously the Renaissance Center, which I didn't know it had its own zip code. It's so sizable. Just neat things that are really understandable and recognizable. But then there's all these new and different and funny things that, again, I think this is when you take someone in the city, when you live in the city, when you're taking people around, you show them this stuff, and it's never going to leave your memory of being here. So this is a restaurant in Southwest Detroit called Mi Pueblo. It's one of my favorite restaurants. And they just have this weird giant bowling pin. Came off a bowling alley that was closing, and they've moved it several times. Right now it's at the entrance. And that's my kid next to it with her friend, just for size comparison. So it has got to be about 12 foot tall. Now, again, this is a Mexican restaurant with a bowling pin. It doesn't need to make sense. It's Detroit. So, and again, super Instagrammable if we're going to use the parlance of the teens. This is something that will stick in your mind. I'm obsessed with all the art going in around the various places in Detroit, but obviously Eastern Market being the home of quite a bit of it. This is one of my favorites that was done this past season of murals in the market. This artist from Chicago came in. He's come to Detroit numerous times, and so I was aware of his work because he did a potato chip bag once. He fills potholes with a material, and then he does this tile work over the top. And this harkens back to ancient Rome, this tradition of these tile creations. So when he did his series around Eastern Market, he found plenty of potholes. That was never a problem. But he filled 10 of them with these unique images, and again, mostly food related. He has one of Aretha Franklin because she passed the week that he was working on this. But my favorites are, obviously we got like a steak and a peach, and then a coney dog, if nothing more symbolic about Detroit than that. But again, with the changes, you're going to see all sorts of new art pop up. And I bring up the wonderful tributes to Aretha Franklin that in those short weeks right after her death, she became now, again, our queen in a whole new way. And we're going to see so much more of this, I think, as the city grows. And there's many walls that still need to be turned into artwork. And there's a great influx of new businesses to complement the businesses that have been there and have been the stalwarts and have stayed and really made Detroit fantastic. I love this one because it's a bunch of shipping containers. And a city like Detroit that's industrial, that has all these wonderful things of our past, still here to remind us, well, we need shipping containers. We got to bring things in. People are now turning them into everything. They're homes. They're Airbnb hotels. They are restaurants. There's a gentleman that's still working on the project, and I pray that it actually comes to fruition, of building a Shakespeare-like theater out of shipping containers. He had talked about doing it where there was some art space going on in Corktown and then in Highland Park. So we'll see if this actually comes to fruition, but it's easily movable and changeable, and it would make an incredible landmark for our area. The Corktown area became kind of expensive recently because this little company called Ford bought the train station and is transforming that radically as well. That, I wish I could have snuck into the book, because the train station, again, was one of these things that I thought I would never see in my lifetime be anything other than an empty building. And Ford has opened it up a few times. I actually got to walk through it at one point, and in complete awe that I think it's 1919 or 1913 building is still in as good shape as it is, thank goodness, and that Ford is dedicated to bringing it back up and making much of it available to the public to use. It's stunning inside. But the thing I just had to add today even, because I was thinking about what are some of the new things that I've been hearing about Detroit, is this restaurant scene is ridiculous too. These aren't so-called secrets, but these are things that I think have really wowed me. The Free Press today revealed its top 10 best restaurants in Metro Detroit, and I think 8 of the 10 are in Detroit. Amazing, amazing. One's in Birmingham, I think one's in Southfield. All the rest are in the city. So you've got Norma G's, which is a Caribbean restaurant on Jefferson. Please go to Norma G's so that they stay open, because he's a fantastic human being. This one's called Marrow, and that's like a butcher shop / restaurant. I guess that's phenomenal. The Fort Street Market, which is like a bunch of different kind of food experiences. And then, what's that last one? Now I'm blanking on it. She-Wolf, if I remember right. So those are, I haven't been to She-Wolf yet because I cannot get a reservation. This is how incredibly vibrant, not only downtown, but the neighborhoods are becoming. Because, for example, Marrow is more in the Villages area. And then you've got Norma Jee's is Jefferson Chalmers. So it's getting there, and it's going to be amazing as this continued renovation of the city continues. And then I had to throw this in here because this is another one of my favorites going on in the city. The hotels and the big renovations of historical landmarks. The Metropolitan is a new hotel that just opened. The picture to the far left is what it used to look like. And we would all drive by it. I used to call it the Taylor Swift building because someone had graffitied a bunch of hearts on it. It just was so bizarre of a landmark. And you're like, I wonder what that was. Well, when they completely renovated it and reopened it in January of 2019, it's an extended stay hotel. It had all these different jewelers that had their offices there. They kept all of those and made them conference rooms. So an incredible view of the city too. If you want to see Detroit in some of its most beautiful forms, it's, you got the People Mover, you got all the different buildings. It's a great location. And to me, this is a city a lot where you see people take what is old and make it new. We're the ultimate recyclers. The old Cowhead, that used to be on a creamery, and then they moved it to an ice cream store. So we're never going to throw anything away. We're going to make it new and different. That Cowhead was in Eminem's movie 8 Mile. There's a scene in the movie, and that thing is now available for sale. So if someone's really clever, it's right outside Grosse Pointe Park on Mack Avenue. That thing would clean up, I think, if it was operational again. This is a new exhibit that, if I can encourage you to go see, is incredible. This is a photographic reinterpretation or reimagining of what the Black Bottom neighborhood looked like. And they were able to find some photos that were taken, almost like Google Earth style, of all the buildings, of just people in their everyday lives. And it allows you to re-experience what that neighborhood was like before it got torn down. This is up through March at the Detroit Library, at the main branch on the 2nd floor. Not only is the main branch one of the most beautiful libraries, designed by the same man that designed buildings in Washington, D.C., like the Supreme Court building, but it has this incredible walk-through exhibit where you feel like you're actually back in another world, another time. And that one was recreated. They even created some like little porches so you can kind of feel like what it might be to sit like and watch the world go by. So cool. But there's wonderful things happening that I also thought were strange and weird, but again, symbolize what we do and what we do best. This is a Frank Lloyd Wright house that's in the city of Detroit. There's a handful in Michigan. We're very lucky to have them. Midland is going through a huge cataloging, Midland, Michigan, of its mid-century modern buildings and really trying to make themselves a design capital for that time period. We have the only Frank Lloyd Wright house in Detroit in Palmer Woods. And the owners who own Blossom's Flower Shop have renovated it way past 7 figures at this point. It is stunning. They open it up for events for Palmer Woods. They do a garden tour that if you want to see the grounds, which are just as elegant and incredible as the interior. The Frank Lloyd Wright tour for the houses all in the area are wonderful, and this one is a great example. Right there in Detroit, we have one of his. But then we also have wonderful, funny things like this. This is Monumental Kitty. And a bunch of young guys and young women, when they moved into Corktown before it was so-called cool, wanted some entry point. When you got off the freeway, when you got off I-75, there was nothing to greet you. Welcome to Corktown. Everybody's coming to, at that time, Tiger Stadium to go to a baseball game. They found a bunch of bricks. They hired an artist. They fundraised the artist's wages for it out of like a Kickstarter. And he created this cat that's waving to you as you come into town. Because you're going to see the Detroit Tigers, why not a cat welcoming you? And again, this is just one of these weird things that you have to see to believe. I heard about it. I knew that they were doing it at the time, never went to go see the finished product, and was pleasantly surprised to see it is alive and kicking. That thing is probably, again, maybe 10 foot by 12 foot. It's humongous. The things that I explored that the summer we did the book too, I went to the log cabin in Palmer Woods, Palmer Park area. They have the Palmer donated his summer home, so to speak, when he and his wife were done using this log cabin that served as their getaway from the kind of smells and sights of downtown Detroit. They gave it to the city to use, and it's been maintained ever since, so like the late 1800s. to now. And it's slowly being renovated and put back into condition that it was. So it's like a mini Greenfield village right there in Palmer Park. And I love it because they all have wonderful events for kids and families, and you can explore the house, and they've got reenactors from that time period. So who has a log cabin in their urban setting? We do. There's the vertical car, another piece of artwork that I love. Who has a piece of car that someone decided to weld into this vertical space? The London artist Anthony Gross was going through the grand road trip across the United States in an El Camino because he thought El Caminos were super cool. He'd seen one in a Beastie Boys video. So he thought, I need to get me one of those. Tried to drive it across the United States, and of course it broke down on him. Got it to Detroit, hired a bunch of bikers to help him weld it to this loading dock that he bought in like one of the land auctions. It's on Alfred, just off of Gratiot, right by Eastern Market. Now, when I took the pictures, it was perfectly pristine. Since then, it's been tagged a bunch, and then the artists who did murals in the market went and covered up all the tags with art. So now it looks a little bit different than this, but it's still a really cool thing that if your friends are with you and you're going to Eastern Market, say, let's go see the vertical El Camino. This is another favorite of mine that I take people past. Some people were renovating townhouses in Woodbridge area. Big open space across from there. They wanted to kind of generate some interest in their apartment buildings that they're redoing. So one of them, Dan Zemke, did a woodworking project with his dad, said, I want to make kind of like a free little library style library where you can put a book in, take a book out, it's completely free, but I want to make it look like the Doctor Who TARDIS. So if any of you are Doctor Who fans, the TARDIS is his spaceship. It looks like a British police box on the outside, but when you open it up, it's his space traveling ship that's, humongously large on the inside. Now, I took my kids with me to see this one because my son's a big Doctor Who fan. And when you open it up, it actually makes the sound of a spaceship door opening, kind of like Star Trek-y. And my son was just blown away. He just thought that was the coolest thing he'd ever seen. And now, again, people just drive by to go see it. It's become a landmark, and it's brought people to another part that they might not have gone to, which I love. And we're super creative. We're always thinking of new and different ways to do things. This is one of my favorite artists in the city, Carl Niebach. He is doing metalwork all around the city. He does the old stuff, so everything from parks that need to be retrofitted with pieces that maybe had fallen off or fixed to very new things. And his place, again, by Eastern Market, allows people to see not only the things he makes, like metal origami, but now he's creating these windmills there that he'll put all around the city that are just cell phone chargers, basically. But they're also going to create wind and energy and different ways to use what's all around us. I love that creativity. He's really going to do some amazing things, I think, in the years to come. Another favorite development, this is called True North. It's a Quonset hut community. A young man that moved here from New York by way of Houston. He grew up in Texas, went to New York City, kind of thought he could make his way there, realized that in New York you're nobody, but in Detroit you can be somebody. Came here, opened a restaurant, and realized he had an opportunity to become a landowner in a real and significant way, bought some parcels together, and built 9 of these Quonset huts. Had an architect design them to be like lofts, basically, just kind of cool homes that had a big open space. And now there's the 9 originals, and then now they're building on. So they're going to have office buildings and an art gallery, and in addition to this, that will be really fascinating to see how it gets used. So these have everything from a yoga studio. They've got an Airbnb, so you can spend the night if you wanted to try out what it's like to live in a Quonset hut overnight. This has won dozens of architectural awards for our city. True North, and I'm going to get this wrong because I am directionally challenged. I want to say Grand River. It's in the book. I can cheat and look in the book. I'll get you the address. Yeah, I get lost going to get my kids Little Caesars pizza. So that's why I made sure the book had the address so that you could use MapQuest and just program in all your directions like I would. We'd put 4 or 5 locations in and then just see everything. My other favorite housing development is the tiny houses. This is at Cass Community Services. Reverend Faith Fowler is very inventive. She's always coming up with new ways to find ways to either put people to work, give them places to go, find ways to use what's all around her. And so one of the things she had was land. And the tiny house movement was starting, so she had different people through both contributions as well as their own labor build these small houses. There's 25 or 26 that would be built. I think they're probably about halfway through them. And each one is unique and different. And it's about, I would say, the size of a studio apartment usually, or a one-bedroom apartment. And they are just fabulous. And she actually will have fundraising parties where you get to walk through the houses for like $100 a plate to fundraise for Cass Community Services, which does an incredible job of returning citizens, people who had been homeless, people who are looking at trying to improve their lives, young students that are first getting started can live in these houses and buy them at the end of 7 years and become property owners in the city of Detroit. Pretty cool stuff. And then I love the art developments, things that took, for example, in this case, the Lincoln Street Art Park is a recycling center for the city of Detroit. When there wasn't one that was easily accessible, some residents created one. And they have this old automotive building. Well, next door to it was an open field, kind of this big empty lot. So they said, well, we'll just make it art. You bring us the recycled or new art that you've created, and we'll display it. And we'll have parties there, and they have like a stage, they have a fire pit, they do events there all the time. They create floats and incredible things that they have in some of the parades in the city, all at this one location. And what I love about it, that container that's on site is actually a school facility in a way now. Students can come from any school that wants to have the program and learn about Detroit and recycling. And that became a program they do separate from the recycling. But it's, again, a unique thing that took nothing and turned it into something. And I just think that's an incredible thing. Otherwise, the land would just be sitting there. A lot of the project, too, I spent kind of researching some of the things I'd heard over the years, the ghosts of Detroit, and that I had heard of. There's this wall in Detroit that separated one housing development from another. It's the 8 Mile Wall. Well, is there really an 8 Mile Wall? Yeah, there really is. It's incredible. You should go see it because it's one of the most bizarre things I've ever witnessed in real life. So that's what that bottom middle photo is. In the 40s, the federal government commanded a developer to build a wall between a white suburb he wanted to build and a black neighborhood that was already there. So to get federal funding, our government said, you got to create separation because that's the way it has to be. And so he built the wall. Now, in modern times, they've painted it with murals. It's next to an incredibly beautiful park where kids are playing. And I took my daughter and we actually played. I mean, this is an asset for the community. But also, they're working on getting it landmark status to get it made into a part of Detroit's history. Same thing with the different homes. You've got the Orsel and Minnie McGee house. They helped end redlining in the nation. They moved into a house that they were told they were not allowed to live in because they were African American and the rest of the neighbors were white. They and their neighbors agreed that they would sue because this was ridiculous. They should be allowed to live where they want. And it went to the United States Supreme Court with another couple. And the United States Supreme Court did indeed ban these kind of covenants or redlining because of a family in Detroit. Obviously, we have the Dr. Ocean Sweet House as well, the 1925 civil rights case that Clarence Darrow actually helped defend family from Detroit. That one is actually also becoming a historical district. The city got funding from the federal government to buy several of the buildings all around, and they're going to turn it into a history center. And you'll be able to go in and out of the Dr. Sweet's house and get to see that landmark site. The book Arc of Justice tells that story incredibly well. And to go see these places in person was really monumental. The other one that is one of my favorites is the one in the left. That's for Dr. Joseph de Hortus. It's a monument, and again, my directional challenge self will say, it's Gratiot and not West Grand River. I'm terrible with this. Grand Boulevard, does that sound right? Gratiot and Grand Boulevard. I heard about it, that this memorial had been put up because the doctor had died in the 1943 race riot in the city, and that the Italian-American community had paid for this memorial. It's Italian marble, I guess. And I thought, no way. I've driven down that street a million times. I've taken Gratiot to the Better Made facility and into downtown or wherever I'm going. How could that be there? And sure enough, it is. If you just slow down and look for it. It's this beautiful bench, a series of benches all around the monument, and it's meant to just be a place of reflection. One of the things I love that the city of Detroit did in the last couple of years is they took down fences around the parks, and they made everything a lot more open and beautiful and green, and that is another little green space within a busy corridor that you could just sit there and look around. I mean, you park your car and read about this great man's life. He was an immigrant to the United States, wanted to live and work here because he was proud to be part of the American dream, was going to service patients that were in Black Bottom when he was he had an accident, whether it was because he was hit with a rock or the rock was being thrown and he was just in the wrong place, the wrong time. That's still debatable, but he died serving his patients. And so it was an honor to see his monument in person. But I think a lot should be remembered, but a lot has also been improved and changed and honored in different ways. Like this went up 2 years ago, the 1967 monument at Gordon Park near 12 Mile, where the race riot rebellion of 1967 started. Gordon Park has been completely renovated. Those whole neighborhoods are going to go through a huge renaissance. You have beautiful things happening all around. And this day, they were having like a festival in honor of the sign being installed. And there were food trucks and people having music on a stage that had been put there. And everybody was so friendly and having a wonderful time. And again, my kid and I just kind of hung out and enjoyed the evening. Met a lot of new people and had a wonderful time in probably one of the most beautiful parks in a city full of parks. So I love to see both things remembered, but things brought to a point where people want to be there and they enjoy being there, and the whole neighborhood will benefit from that. So what I guess leave you with is that as you're in Detroit and as you're learning about new weird places, like we had this thing in the Alfred Ford Park that was where if there had been missiles installed on Belle Isle, they were going to keep an eye out for them in World War II. You got that kind of fun stuff. You've got these domed houses that are kind of like a geodesic dome. Those are for sale too, in case anybody wants to live there. You've got parks that go to nowhere, like the Hurlbut Memorial Gate that used to go into Waterworks Park. It's still there, and it is one of the most beautiful, I think, facades. And I'd love to see that turned back into a public park someday, but I don't think that'll ever happen. But that's another great one that, like, don't just drive past it, stop and go look at it. It's stunning. It was built, again, that late 1800s time period. And then where some people might see that, there's a building that needed repair, you can also see incredible optimism. The gentleman who renovated this house for a series of apartment buildings, did it to a wonderful design, knew he had created something great for people to live in, but how do you get them to know that it's here? So he commissioned a local artist to create these wood statues out in front. And it gave these apartment buildings this huge personality. So you got the Lorax house, and then he put the Dr. Seuss Lorax kind of theme in front. Then you got the Alice in Wonderland house. Just little touches that created a moment, a landmark. I dragged my kids to all these places as we went around on tour, and they can still remember. Remember we went to the Lorax house? Oh yeah, their direction's much better than mine. They can tell me where it is. And so continuing to explore, continuing to see the new things there are, the wonderful things that have always been there, and to honor the history and the incredible people that have lived in this city and built it up and are still there today and are doing incredible things. I just think Detroit is spectacular. Detroit, Hamtramck, Highland Park, all the whole areas. So these are just a smattering of some of the other places just for fun. But I encourage everybody to go out and see anything that they think would be interesting that's in the book. I joke, you can take it and throw it in your glove box. And if you're in town doing something else, make a day of it. Stay and go to one of these incredible restaurants. So you can go to Folk for breakfast and then do a tour and then go someplace else for lunch and then go to a museum and then go someplace else for dinner. I mean, move into the city and the incredible housing that's being renovated and beautiful homes all over. Great places to work, great places to open businesses. You've got these fun places here, like, for example, that's the Lawndale Market off of 4th Street, down by Del Rey area. And they have easily 10,000 Polaroid pictures. Every customer that came in, he took a picture of them and hung it on the wall. And he's like, now you're my friend. And literally every surface in that place is covered with a picture. Now, because Polaroids are hard to come by, he'll take your photo if you bring one in and hang it up for you as well. Ty Cobb I had to throw in there just for fun. But it's a wonderful place to visit. I'm always open to new places to see and explore. And I love seeing what's new and different in Detroit. Try desperately to keep up. It's changing too fast for me some days. But thank you so much for your attention, and any questions anybody has, I'm happy to answer to the best of my ability, or find someone who knows. Yes, sir.
Maybe 2 questions. One, did you ever get into the salt mines? And are those things I understand are not available? And then second question, you said you had 90 items in your book. What would be number 91 if you had one more?
Oh, I would, for the question of what would be number 91, I would definitely put the train station or the Michigan Central Depot in there, just because I was impressed that they're going to take something that large and renovate it and turn it into something that's available to the public, as well as Ford will really create a campus in Corktown. The salt mines are definitely in the book. I went to go take a picture of the salt mines and did not know, I'll give you the punchline early, that they had just fired somebody that day. So I pull up in my little car and get out and start taking pictures, and they came out with 3 security guards. And they're like, they thought I was a lawyer on behalf of the gentleman who'd been fired. And they're like, you need to leave immediately. And so luckily I was able to just explain, I'm just this little schmuck writing a little book, and I have nothing else to do with anything whatsoever. And after the course of about a half hour of this conversation, he finally believed me, because I was like showing him my business cards or whatever. And then he told me, he's like, you're actually in a horrible place to take a picture. You can't see anything from here. Go up on the on-ramp that goes up over as if you're going downriver. And you go to the top of that on-ramp. You got to park in Del Rey. I love Del Rey. Don't get me started on that. But like, you park in Del Rey and you walk up. And if you stand at the overpass, you can see into the salt mine, and it's incredible. You can see the whole thing. So no, they don't do tours anymore. I was hoping if I was a good girl, someday I could ask them. But I think because of safety reasons. So like the guy who does the Dirty Job show, he asked, and they wouldn't let him in either. Because, again, same thing with Better Made. They can't do tours of the potato chip factory anymore because of food safety. And so the same thing happens with this. The salt mines aren't open. But what an incredible thing that would be to see. Because I guess they go, again, hundreds of miles under the city. Hundreds might be an exaggeration, but it's significantly huge and would be a fascinating part of living here. When I would interview people in Del Rey when I was writing the story, I guess every day they would set off explosives, because that's how they mined the salt. And everybody in Del Rey kind of could set their watches by it. Oh, it's 3 o'clock. You'd hear these explosive, and it would shake your house. And they were like, oh, okay, they're mining the salt again today. That's a great one to go by. Do not step onto their property, but it's a great one to go, at least go up to that ramp and park safely if you can before you go up to the ramp. I don't recommend stopping at the top of the ramp in your car. I do recommend walking, but so that I loved. I love that salt mine. Yes, sir.
Yeah, is the Heidelberg project in your book?
Yeah, I had to include Heidelberg. It's gone through, unfortunately, with the arsons and so many transformations. But they're on Heidelberg, I think, at this point, 3.0. And they're redoing a bunch of things, like they're going to have it be more of an educational location. The artwork that's there is always going to be there. And I can see where Mr. Guyton would actually add to it at some point. But I think he feels like he's going to retire. I'm going to mess up her name. The woman who runs it now has kind of been given his blessing, like, you are in charge. And then they have this glorious young woman who used to go there as a student and volunteer, who's now running their grants program as well. I've interviewed them for different stories. So they're going to really continue the art and the expression of how does a neighborhood that's gone through everything from extremes of being a very opulent, beautiful place to live to a drug haven to now an artistic community. How do you do that, and how do you maintain it, and how do you encourage other artists to explore their own ideas? So they're going to make it more of a learning center, is how I understood, in its next iteration. But I had to get them in there because I wanted someone who was never in Detroit to use this as like a tourism book, but also people who hadn't been to places in years to go back and look at things again. Sorry I keep making it a tourist book. I would hope that even people that lived in the city or who go to school in the city would also enjoy it that way. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so as far as tours are concerned, there's been so many tour companies that are popping up, and I've taken some tours that are excellent, some a lot of money and not so excellent. Can you recommend a way to find a good tour company that is reputable, I don't know if you're allowed to recommend anything for us, but...
Well, I will throw out that I know most of the tour company people in some way. Like, I've either gone on their tours or I've met them at events. So like Black Scroll with Jaman Jordan, that guy's brilliant.
Yeah. Can you
There
spell
should
I'm
be-
sorry, how do you spell the name?
Jamon, I believe is his first
Okay.
name, and Jordan. And it's Black Scroll Network. Scroll like a
Scroll,
roll of
okay.
paper. If you want to know anything about Detroit, A, he can
Okay.
research it, but B, he's really intelligent, so well, I can't even say enough. Like, I bow down. There would be certain people that, I've actually sent him stuff and said, I can't write this, will you please write this? Because I know he knows, like, so much more. So I would highly recommend him. He does Underground Railroad, he does anything around Black history. He does museums. He can create tours. That's his specialty, but again, the guy can do anything. There's a 7.2, I think is the name of the company. They do downtown. Oh, who else is wonderful? I like Bailey. She has a company called Detroit History Tours. She
Right.
brings in some really great speakers, and she has a lot of friends who do history in the city that she'll bring in to talk. She's had Marcia Music come in. She's had a lot of people who have lived in the places they talk about. So they're not just like me. I'm a book learner. I've researched these things. Whereas Marcia lived in Black Bottom because her dad owned a store there. So you want to look for, if you can, research who owns it as much as possible. And there's going to be more. There's going to be so many more that will come up as new and interesting things. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be Corktown tours and this and that. And but they're all unique because everybody's got their shtick.
Okay.
And they are going to do something different. So you can do a Segway tour. You can do a boat tour. You can do one of the goofy bikes that go through the city with 20 people on them. I mean, like, the place is crazy now. Well, I remember when I worked down there, you could pretty much park anywhere you wanted. And the other day I had to go to the auto show, and I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. I think I had to park somewhere and take the people mover in, if I remember right. I mean, there's no way that this is going to stop. This is now our new life, and it's fabulous. I hate not having parking, and I love not having parking at the same time. Yes, ma'am.
What was that cone-like cylinder ice
Oh,
cream?
that
in the center?
I thought it was unique at first. That's an Igloo ice cream place in Hamtramck. But then I found out later that this giant ice cream cone is actually in different cities all around the area. I included Hamtramck and Highland Park in this because I thought, again, if you're a city within the city, that's in Hamtramck. But it's not that unique, so it didn't make the book. But I thought it was really cool because it really is a landmark. Like everybody knows where the giant ice cream cone is. The Buddhist temple, the lower left gold figure, that's in Hamtramck as well. A little Buddhist temple that you can go and buy something from their vegetarian restaurant. Yes, sir.
What's your hurry up and get to before it's gone, please?
Oh. Well, hurry up and go before everybody goes in there and makes it so popular that you'll never get in. Like Burt's has been getting so much press lately. Burt's, B-E-R-T-S. It's like a restaurant / nightclub / social scene. That's not really, downtown. It's more, eastern area. There's places that are like hallmarks of Detroit. I mean, I don't want to use the bars and all the restaurants, but like they are going to be swamped because everybody now is hearing about them alongside all the new restaurants. So Capers used to be something that was hidden away. When the Grosse Pointe moms start going to Capers, that's when you know it's no longer a hidden thing. I'm trying to think if anything's like disappearing though. Easter Market is changing rapidly. I will say that. For the good to some degree. I interviewed the guy who runs Easter Market, and I'm going to apologize. Dan Carmody. I have to imitate him to remember his name. And he said the best thing that happened to Eastern Market was that all this property around it was kind of left vacant because now it's so valuable. Because of the success of the market and how unique it is and its history and all these businesses using it as an incubator to build up and grow, there's going to be buildings everywhere. And everything's going to be the second and third generation owners, and everybody's going to get kicked out. But so it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. That's the conundrum of a growing city. I don't think we're different than anybody else, unfortunately. There's emails I get daily from all these urban newsletters about all these awful things happening in every city. And we're no different. We have too many parking lots and not enough new houses, and we have too many micro lofts for Dan Gilbert's employees and not enough development of residential areas where people actually need to be in safe, good homes. Like I've been studying Delray a lot. That's where the Gordie Howe Bridge is going in. And they basically let that fall apart for the last 20 years. They let it fall apart for a lot longer than that because they knew the bridge was going there and people are living in housing that is so unsafe, and then kids all have asthma and people are dying of cancer at higher rates. And I can't prove any of this number-wise, but statistically, if you look at what's happened there, that's still Detroit too. So as beautiful as some of this stuff is, you still have a whole lot of problems that really need to be resolved and thought through. But people are trying, and people are really investing. So like they don't own just one business. Some of them are owning 3 and 4 businesses. And Norma G's was a food truck. I remember meeting him, the guy who owns it, when he was in one of those food incubators. And now he's got a restaurant. That's why I'm like, everybody go to Norma G's, because he just won. Again, I think he's number 7 in the top 10 best restaurants in Detroit. The Free Press just named him that. So you're not getting into Norma G's anytime soon. They'll be all at the trendier restaurants anyway. I think Norma G's is too far off the beaten path, but we should all go. Buy your Better Made so that they don't close against Frito-Lay, and go to your local restaurant and find out who owns the tour company and do they live in the city versus do they live in the suburbs. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's just stuff to think about. How can you support things in the best, most, I guess, all boats would rise way, maybe. But there's so many smart, good people working and living and making this place great. It benefits all of us. Yes, sir.
Have you done any research on some of the old movie theaters, like the Cinerama or the Ramona? Some of those, the Palms, some of those, I remember when I was a kid.
I personally haven't. I admit I have more of a drive-in knowledge base, but even that is slim compared to, there's websites out there. There's one called Water Winter Wonderland that trace the history of all the theaters and will say, who built it, how long it was open, and then they'll have like chat board sometimes where people who've worked there or met their spouse there will talk about it. So I'd recommend those kind of resources. And then I always use newspapers.com. If you can't do the subscription to that, I think some libraries might have it. But that has the Detroit Free Press all the way back to like 1838 or whenever the Free Press opened. And you can research your heart out because it'll give you not only articles about that particular building or that particular place, but advertisements and classified ads. And that's how a lot of these history authors, your Laura Hildebrands and Eric Larsons and David McCulloughs, that's how they write their books, is they look not only for those newspaper articles, but they look for the culture and the life around it. So when I write about Del Rey, I interview people that lived in Del Rey in the same time period that she did, but I also looked at what were they selling in the stores and what movie theaters were there and what nightclubs and what did people do for fun. So newspapers.com is my favorite of all of them. The Burton inside the Detroit Public Library's main branch, the Burton, they're mean as heck because they're way understaffed for librarians. So you really got to be on point when you ask for your research. You want to say what you want. You don't want to waste their time because they're being worked to death. But they can find you anything. They're amazing, and that's an amazing resource too. Detroit Historical Museum has an incredible website. You can use their search terms and you can find, sorry to use Del Rey again, but I'm obsessed with it at the moment. They have like 300 plus photos and there's really good oral history archives. So if you want to hear someone talk about visiting that movie theater or Detroit, what it was like back in that day, there's many, many good oral histories that not only our historical museums putting together, but are documented in some other libraries in the area. The Library of Congress has incredible old photos of Detroit. Right now, I'm researching the building of the Ambassador Bridge, which was known as the Detroit River Bridge, because a scene in a book I'm working on takes place there. And so I just put in, for example, at the Detroit Historical Museum's website, I put in 1929, or it might have been the Detroit News Archive photos. Just put in the year I wanted, 1929. And you can see pictures of the bridge being built. It's incredible. It's so cool to be able to pick any moment in Detroit history that you want, and I guarantee you there are umpteen resources to research it on. There's guys like Dan Austin, too, who's obsessed with buildings that have been torn down. And he goes and finds all the photos of the buildings and tries to recreate that moment in Detroit history. Like, Detroit had, Metro Detroit, but Detroit in particular had like the most registered bowlers in the United States. And there were buildings where it was like 4 floors of pool halls, 4 floors of bowling alleys, like just dumb stuff like that I'm like, I wonder if Dan knows anything about this particular building. And sure enough, you go to his website and he's got a whole article on it. There's this one building in Detroit, where the whale mural is, as everybody calls it? There's no windows on the building near it. Why are there no windows? Well, there was another building there. And then when they tore that building down, they just never put windows in. So I'm not saying it as well as I could, but it's that kind of dumb stuff that you're like, why does this happen? Someone else has asked that question, trust me, and somebody out there knows. WDET does this thing called Curiosity, and you can ask them questions like, why are there 5 gross points? Why are there this? Why is there that? And they'll answer it for you. So it's kind of fun to make someone else do your work, so to speak. So my knowledge is unfortunately limited, but that's what's so fun about doing these projects, is it leads you down these weird roads. So I did the book on drive-in theaters, and then I heard about this guy named Minoru Yamasaki because his firm built a drive-in and a movie theater. Well, it turns out he also created the Consolidated Gas building, which is known now as One Woodward, and he also did half of Wayne State's campus, and oh gosh, he did the World Trade Centers. An architect from Detroit. Like, we're that cool. Like, we're amazing. Some of the best architects in the world lived and worked here. Like, that's awesome.
The luncheon season is starting, and the fish dinners at Sweetest
Yes.
are fabulous.
Yeah, and we have incredible religious buildings. Incredible. I mean, there were more than 200 synagogues in the city of Detroit. Now it's kind of like one. But, so there's so much to learn and understand about what we are in 2019 is explained by what we were in 1919 and 1819, and you just keep going back, and you can just be in awe of what you can learn. Like right now I'm researching Fort Street. What's the history of Fort Street? You know, why did it get that name? What was on it over the years? You know, dumb stuff like that. And I don't know anything. It's just so much to learn, and it's a never-ending quest, and I love it. So thank you for hearing me out. Anybody have any other questions, let me know.